Soul, Sportage, Borrego. Makes you ask the question, what's in a name? And with words like that, not all that much. But wow, the balls on Kia to name not just a car, but a baby buggy after one of the most magical ski towns in North America. That takes a golden set. So, if they're gonna pull off something like that, you and I need to lavish extra scrutiny on their new people hauler that they saw fit to call Telluride. $4,112 up to $4,317. That is the weight of the most basic Telluride, and then that second number is the weight of this Telluride. Same engine either way. With that, we're going to go into the comfort mode, and let's see how fast this thing is. Bist du fertig? Ich auch. There's a delay. In fairness, we're at 8,000 feet above sea level, so this is going to have an impact. This ain't a turbo. Admittedly, this thing ain't designed to be a stoplight drag racing machine. It's designed to cart the Rugrats around. But still, there is some value to this V6 in that it has direct injection. And I would argue it's designed more for passing power or acceleration on highways than it is accelerating off the line. So let's switch over to sport mode and simulate passing. Let's say I wanted to get past somebody here. There isn't a huge amount of pageantry and noise to do this, which is ideal for the application of being a family car. You and I have talked about a lot of Hyundai and Kia engines over the past 10 years. This one is going to sound like we've talked about it before, and I promise, at least I promise from the Kia folks, that this is totally new. It's a 3.8 V6, 291 horsepower that comes in at a very aggressive 6,000 RPM. The torque is not much better, 262, comes in at 5,200 RPM. That does not sound like a high-feature V6 that we've come to expect from these guys. There is an 8-speed automatic, or really I should say anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed automatic. The choice comes in whether you want the power to go to the front wheels or all four wheels. Now the combination of the direct injection and that all-wheel drive will play a role later on in this episode. You and I have driven this transmission before. We drove it in the Stinger, worked well there, but this whole application has different demands because it's a soft rotor. But the same benefits we saw there actually make the trip here. If I want to get more aggressive, go up this hill here, you don't have these hard shifts. The shift points come at kind of the right point. It delivers power, works well, it's matched well to this engine. Now there's two transmission mapping settings. That was the sport. Let's slow down here a little bit. Let's go to the comfort, and there's a longer grade here. There's no one behind us. So let's dig a little bit harder here. And there's a shift point at 6,000. Also at 6,000. So definitely tuned for fuel economy, but still can deliver some performance even at 8,000 feet above sea level. But all the while, even under load like this, it delivers on its MO, which is to change gears, somewhat keep fuel economy in check while not disturbing its occupants. Huge disclosure at the sort of top of this episode. That unibody, not body on frame. Now that we understand each other, front wheel drive, McPherson struts, coil springs, and a stabilizer bar. If one were to fit a Telluride with a all-wheel drive system, it would be a multi-link unit in the back with a stabilizer bar. The brakes in the front, 13.4-inch diameter rotors. In the back, 12-inch diameter rotors. Then there are two sizes of wheels on offer. On the basic version, it's an 18-inch. This, not so basic, 20 inches. I'd also like to point out the black wheels with the green looks pretty cool. Understandably, this is not exactly where I should be sitting to discuss driving dynamics, but there's an important point we didn't cover yet, and that's when you get in this thing. you immediately notice it's not an SUV, it's a crossover. But the thing you notice is the length. That's like the first thing that slaps you across the face. And this is what you feel, that extra wheelbase and that extra length. Maybe I've just spent too much time in Sorrentos or two-row crossovers as of late, but you notice the extra weight back here, because that's really where the 4,100 pounds up to 4,300 pounds is. Another disclosure. This looks like it competes with a Tahoe. It looks chunky, it looks big, but a Tahoe it ain't. It's considered like a plus midsize, so it competes with like a Highlander, a Pilot, a Traverse. Not cool vehicles, even though this one looks way cooler than that. Here's some proof, the all-wheel drive system. So there are 5 different settings. There's Eco, Smart, Sport, Snow, and all-wheel drive lock. In Eco and Smart, it's 100% a front-wheel drive vehicle. In Snow, it's 80% a front-wheel drive vehicle. In Sport, it's 65% a front-wheel drive vehicle. Only when it goes into all-wheel drive lock is the power evenly distributed amongst all 4 wheels. But here's the catch. Go over 40 miles an hour and it's front-wheel drive. You know, we talk about in many episodes where the design of a vehicle writes a check that sometimes the driving dynamics can't cash. This is one of these instances. You look at this thing and it says rugged, it says truck, it says tough, but you get behind the wheel and it immediately slaps you across the face and says, this is a car. Which is not a bad thing, because it's going to be used in the suburbs of Atlanta, places like that, not the beautiful back roads of Telluride. But something's interesting here in that it's a Kia, which means it's part of the Hyundai group, which means 60% of the construction is high-strength steel. And why is that important? You see, a company like Hyundai Kia, they can't afford to use a lot of aluminum or carbon fiber to lower the weight of the vehicle to improve the structural rigidity, thus making it drive better or handle better. However, high-strength steel can be adjusted in the thickness in certain parts, so it's actually a great trick to lower the weight of a vehicle. So something this size, that's almost 200 inches in length, can still be in the low 4,000s, as opposed to like that G-Class we drove, that's 55 to 5,800 pounds. Which brings us back to the sweepers of Colorado, so if I get more aggressive, I get lean, but it's not ridiculous. How many times have you and I talked about the interior of a Hyundai or a Kia, and we talk about value, whiz-bang apps, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto? Today we're not going to talk about any of that, because something is very different here. This is more about design, and I would argue way more about tactile feel, because I think they've been looking at the episodes and saying something's missing, and it's definitely tactile feel. Let's start with design. They clearly lifted the general theme from the sticker, which is, say, a good thing. This, more width to it, a lot of horizontal lines, nice touch. But then someone was looking at the CX-9, because what they did is they raised the center console. But instead of being like a direct rip-off of the CX-9, they raised really the sides, and they have these chunky like grab handles, which is a cool touch in a soft roader. It makes it look tougher. Then they repeat that design in the door panels. Then I would argue Hyundai's, Kia's, Genesis, they've already been blessed with really good switchgear, because they're knobs and switches, even toggle switches, thank you very much. But then they add on top of that tactile feel. Like you look at this wood or the satin finish aluminum here, which are also in the CX-9, I'd like to point out. But here, they were honest, it's definitely faux. But then to layer on top of that, the headliner. I don't know if it's trying to be nubuck or suede, but whatever it is, it transforms the interior, especially when you're sitting in the back. Because now, instead of it being a place with a lot of apps and like really cool stuff and value, now it's a place you actually want to spend some time in. You and I have done this backseat trick a couple times before, but today we're going to shake it up a bit because I busted out the Sorels for 2 reasons. Number one, I live in Southern California, never get to wear them. Number two, really wanted to understand this 114.2-inch wheelbase. So this is where I would sit, 6 foot. I've even sandbagged it a bit by putting the seat back a little bit farther, and check this out. I can actually cross my legs with the Sorels on. Kudos to Kia on that. And then there's a couple of things you notice immediately when you sit back here. Number one, it's fancier. This Sorrento we drove like a couple of years ago now, that, I would call that value but not fancy. Here, for example, the back seat, this one's got the captain's chairs, there's a bench that's on offer as well. But with the captain's chairs, it has heated seats, which Hyundai was the first one to put it in non-fancy cars with the Elantra back in 2011. But here, it's also got cooled seats too in the back. I don't think anybody else besides super fancy like Porsche and Mercedes do that. Anyway, I'm not going to use the cooled seat today, I'm going to go heated seat. And then it's got the armrest, no console obviously to get to the back. I don't know if I'd want that. Weigh in the comments below, would you want to see a console here? Then there's a lot of power going on. It's got USB, and it's USB 3.0, not C, thank you very much, throughout every row. Front, center, and even in the back, there's two on each side. So there's one here, one there, and one on either side of the walls there, and then two up front. Then if that's not enough, there's a SIG plug adapter in the front, and then an AC adapter back here. I mean, this is like, you're getting ready for war back here. Then it's even got adjustments for the HVAC system in the rear, which can be overridden in the front. And then I've got cup holders. Obviously I can use that storage for my phone while I'm plugging in my phone here. And then map pockets on both sides. You know, Hyundai Kias, they actually don't put them on both sides. In this one, they obviously do. And then there's a second sunroof in the back. This is the fancy, I think they call this the SX. I've closed this so you can actually see me. And then what we talked about earlier, like the tactile feel even extends back here because you get that fancy headliner. The faux wood extends back here. And just like the pageantry of these vents, the way it works, it's definitely a step up from what Kia was doing even in the Stinger. You know how light signatures are all the rage these days, and not just on fancy cars like Escalades and Mercedes, even on things like Hyundais. Well, Kia's getting into the act. Here there is indeed a light signature. It's a box around the headlight, but there's a party trick, and it depends on which light is fitted to the car. This is a base car, has the projector beam headlight, has a white light signature. This one is a fancy one with the LED headlights, has the orange light signature. So you guys don't know this, but there's a camera guy sitting over there. His name is Greg Jerem, and I just completely got him. He's the guy that takes the still photographs for Kia. Known this guy for years, and that's like a nice payback. With that, I got a stunt driver, the guy that was driving while I was sitting in the back. His name is Ben. He and I were driving after we took the cameras off the car, and we're both kind of scratching our heads thinking to ourselves, there's something very familiar about this. And we couldn't quite place it. And then all of a sudden, the ball dropped at exactly the same time for both of us. And we realized, this is the nicest Ford Flex we've ever seen or driven. I mean, it's way prettier than a Flex, but it's got that same kind of comfortable, big old station wagon kind of feel when you drive it on the road. So we both agreed, we got to fix that. We found this road to a trailhead. Granted, this is not something you are going to do rock crawling with, but we still want to try it off-road because it's got an all-wheel drive system. I will say it's mostly front-wheel drive even on this dirt. So let's force it to go into all-wheel drive. I'm going to lock it. So as we discussed, the lock sends 25% of the wheels, basically distributes evenly around all four wheels. But here's the catch. We're 20 miles an hour right now. I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive. I'm going to get the speed up, still in four-wheel drive, but the minute I hit 40 miles an hour, front-wheel drive. It's probably not a good idea to drive this fast on this road. Wouldn't you agree? So a couple of things. Number one, that's a car museum over there. Gateway Auto Museum in Colorado. Wonderful place, so much so you can ride around the grounds on a bicycle. One of them is a Foose designed bicycle. I couldn't find it, someone stole it. So we're left with this cream color with hot pink wheels. And that's where we get to the second point. We have yet to talk about storage. They tell me 87 cubic feet of storage with all the seats down here. But I'm not gonna go all the way there. Let's see if we can get this thing in here with just the third row down. So if I had just the second row up, so two rows, it would be 46 cubic feet. And if I had all three up, it'd be 21 cubic feet. But it actually fits. Now let's go to the car museum. An admission, I am ridiculously biased when it comes to the state of Colorado. Everything is better in Colorado, absolutely everything. But there is one geographical thing we do need to discuss, and that is this was the first Kia that was not designed for any other market except for the US. So much so that the vehicle was designed in California and it's manufactured in Georgia. This is meant for families and doing some towing. So with that being the case, capacity for towing is 5,000 pounds. You guys know that I love me some party tricks. And here's one even my road wives, Scotty Reese, Jill Simonello, and Nicole Wakeland can appreciate. Quiet mode. And it has nothing to do with the engine. It has everything to do with the audio system. One can shut off the audio to the rear seats as well as the third row, so the parents can drown out their children by listening to like podcasts or music. So this way they can have some semblance of a normal life. Yeah. If I could have your attention for just one moment, we do need to focus on something rather practical. You see, that is A, a large vehicle, and B, it's a box. So one would think it's not very fuel efficient. You wouldn't be really that wrong. It's not terrible. The front wheel drive, which that is not, 23 in the city, 26 on the highway, and 20 combined. That is the all-wheel drive with 20-inch wheels, larger wheels, and that is 21 in the city, 24 on the highway, and 19 combined. Now, as you were with Colorado. And here is a great example of how we're going to try out the steering. This is the first roundabout in between the downtown of Telluride and the airport in comfort mode. Let's hit the roundabout. Please don't do this aggressively. Normally on your own. Thank you very much. Comfort mode, and let's understand it. It works. I mean, this might be some black ice there. There's a lightness to the steering here. Now, see if I can do this. While I'm driving, I just switched to smart. Not smart, let's go to sport mode. There we go. Now we're in sport mode. Yeah, there's a little bit more weight in this, but if I'm honest, there's not a huge impact on the steering as you change the modes. So what did we learn in that somewhat sort of ridiculous exercise that you should not try at home when you're going to Telluride with your Telluride is the changes with the mode, not a huge impact on the steering. It's way more on the throttle mapping and the transmission mapping. Verstehen Sie das? Admittedly, that last bit was a microcosm of an experiment contained within today's larger experiment, which was driving a baby buggy that is named after one of the most magical places in North America. And as a result, I needed to give this a lot more thought. And I'm going to say pay attention and pay attention good, because I don't think I've ever said this in the history of the show. And it's this. In this segment, Kia is going to mop the floor with everyone else's asses. Like, I'm trying to think of a credible competitor. The only thing I can come up with is the CX-9, and at that, only at the higher end level. Like, you'd have to have your head examined to buy something like a Highlander, an Enclave, or heaven forbid, a Traverse, or the Acadia. And I would go so far as to saying is this was an unusually positive experience for me with a crossover, because usually I run home and I pull one of the Porsches out in the back, and when Kumo and I go for a drive. Now I kind of have a taste for a truck, but this time a real truck. So Kumo called and got this, which means I'm going to leave you with a question, kind of a different one. Do you want to see an episode on this or a G-Wagen? Until I see you next time, bis später.